Now this is a story all about how our demand curve got flipped, turned upside down. And I'd like to take a minute, so just sit right there, and I'll tell you why the supply curve goes up in the air. In San Luis Obispo at AGB 212, we're going to tell you what supply is going to do. Lectures, learning, and econ can be cool. Hands down the best class we've taken at the school. Supply is the amount of a good available to consumers in the neighborhood. I said for every. Professor Mick got mad. Say for an additional unit spent, that answer's pretty rad. Supply can change, but hey, have no fear. We'll tell you what shifts it. We will make it real clear. Technology, input, what sellers expect. All of these decide where the line will direct. Hope you like our rap, we think it's pretty fly. This is the honey badger way to describe supply.
Supply is the quantity of goods or services a supplier is willing to produce and sell. Price and production cost determine the supply of a good or service. Higher price influences sellers to supply a larger quantity because the higher the price, the higher the revenue. The law of supply describes this relationship. A supply schedule is a table that shows the quantities supplied at different prices during a particular period. This is then graphed in a supply curve, an upward sloping curve. It is an upward sloping curve because there is a positive relationship between price and quantity supplied. This is the supply curve, and each point on the supply curve represents the quantity supplied for a different price. So if you take this point right here, it means that at this price, let's say it's $4, there would be this quantity supplied. Say it's 100. So the slope of the supply curve is the quantity supplied over the price. So if you move up on the supply curve, you're increasing the price, which in turn increases the quantity supplied.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about shifts in the supply curve. The first shifter we're going to talk about is cost of factors of production. Say the minimum wage was changed from $8.50 to $9 an hour. This means that to employ the same amount of people, it would cost more, or a negative shift in the supply curve to the left. This means that at the same quantity, we would be spending more money. So say 100 gallons would now cost $8 instead of $4.
The next shifter we're going to be talking about is technology. Say for instance a mechanical milker comes about, and this would allow us to produce more milk in a more timely fashion. So we would be able to supply a higher quantity of milk, which would be a shift to the right in the supply curve, and essentially we would be able to produce 100 gallons of milk at a lower price of around $3.
The next shifter we're going to talk about is returns from alternative activities. If you have cows and you're using them for both milk and beef, but the profits and the revenue for milk are better, rather than selling your cows for beef, you're going to keep them for milk, which will shift your supply curve of milk to the right.
The next shifter we're going to talk about is natural events. Say we have a tornado that sweeps through Oklahoma where we have all of our cows, and we lose half of them. This natural event will cause a decrease in the supply or a shift to the left. This means that at the same quantity, it'll cost more per unit.
Another shifter in supply would be seller expectation. And for seller expectation of milk, say if the suppliers of milk decided or found out that price would decrease in the future, they would increase supply now, causing a shift to the right, so that they would make more profit now rather than decrease profit later.
Okay, another thing that shifts the supply curve is the number of sellers. A change in the number of sellers will change the amount of supply of a good at any given price. So an increase in the number of sellers will increase supply, shifting the supply curve to the right. And a decrease in the number of sellers will decrease the supply of a good, shifting the curve to the left. Like so.
Each individual firm has their own supply curve. They are going to make decisions based on how it will maximize their profits. The total benefit of production for a firm is the total revenues from a good minus the total costs of producing the good. This value is the profit the firm made from the production of the good. The marginal benefit is the amount that an additional unit of production increases the total benefit. The marginal cost is the amount that an additional unit of production will cost the firm. Firms are going to continue production as long as they are increasing net benefit. By looking at the marginal benefit, a firm can decide whether to continue production by another unit or not. They will stop producing additional units of a good when they reach equilibrium, which is where the marginal cost is equal to the marginal benefit. At this point, increasing the production of a good or service will not increase their benefit or cost them anything more.
How do you think suppliers will react to the change in the demand in milk?
They've already reacted, and they typically react to changes in demand by changes in nutritional benefits that consumers would like, especially something like the need for higher protein levels, lower butterfat levels. So they'll do a lot of different kinds of things with milk to change the composition of milk, especially protein. There's a lot of whey protein added to lots of energy drinks and so forth now. So there's been a big change in demand.
In recent history, when were milk sales the highest, and what do you think contributed to that?
Between 2010 and 11, they were extremely high because there's a lot of exporting going on. Depends a little bit on the world market, and the world market in the future will continue to have a big effect on milk prices and exporting.
Are there any recent changes in technology that have affected milk production?
Certainly BST, but there's a lot of milk now that's not being affected by BST, but BST does increase milk production with no harmful effects to the milk. And all of the technology that relates to efficient production, such as balancing rations and so forth, all affect milk production.
What is the max price, just in the general ballpark, that you think milk can be sold at before people stop buying it and switch over to the cow milk substitutes, perhaps?
Well, I assume you're talking at the producer rather than consumer level, but it's gotten close to that right now with feed costs extremely high. So somewhere around $20, $22 per hundredweight is probably the max. But the problem is, as feed prices go up maybe extremely high, there's still some room in the middlemen, the processors, in terms of getting the milk price a little higher to consumers. I mean, not consumers, to producers, I should say, and still have the producers make a good profit, and yet the consumers. So there's a big difference in that price right now.
Finally, what do you think the minimum price producers can sell their milk at and still make a profit?
Again, it's so dependent on feed costs, and recently that's been extremely dependent on ethanol production even. So it all relates to the price of corn. And the price of corn probably is not going to ever go as low as it was a few years ago. So I'm going to say somewhere in the $15 to $16 range will probably be the cheapest that a dairyman can make a profitable living producing milk. And maybe even higher. They're not making a lot of money now, even with fairly high milk prices.
All right, thanks a lot.